I've spent a considerable amount of time on this channel talking about the human condition, and basically its universality, the nature of women, the nature of men, and how basically there is a fundamental human nature that cuts across culture, history, and many other things, primarily culture and environment. And I believe that's absolutely true. There are human universals that you can observe in the most primitive or different of cultures, and you can map these observations onto behavioral phenomena found in the most advanced of societies. This is true, and oftentimes you'll get a lot of pushback. There are a lot of people out there who, for whatever reason, seem to insist on the ascendancy and supremacy of culture. I've talked to people many times who think we have ceased evolving as animals or creatures, and they actually believe that there's a cutoff point in the history of humanity whereby humans are no longer subjected to the vagaries of nature because we've erected civilization, technology, buildings, medicine, whatever it might be. I've actually talked to these types of people. It's a very silly thing. It doesn't map onto reality. It's inaccurate. But despite them being largely wrong with their claims and theories, namely the idea that we have somehow superseded evolution and we're no longer subject to its forces, or that human universals are a bare minimal thing, and in fact there's a lot more variety between human beings than people like to think, I don't want to completely dismiss the idea of culture or environmental differences when it comes to human behavior. There are some things which to this day persist and are different across societies, cultures, etc., etc. But even that's becoming less the case over time. So the topic of this video is sort of American women. Sort of, I say, because the reality is there are a lot of things going on that have transformed the mating and dating landscape, and one of them obviously has been the internet. And so the globalized perspective vis-a-vis the internet is one that increasingly is eliminating a lot of these cultural environmental differences. If you think about the Zoomers and the Alphas, well, these are people that are fundamentally plugged into the internet. And a lot of the mating and dating action takes place online, and for those guys, much more so than for previous generations. This cuts into a lot of the differences we can observe between cultures and different environments. Yes, there's still some things there, and we're going to talk about that. But the reality is if you're a 20-something-year-old going forward, or even younger, let's say you're a child now, and you fast forward 15 or 20 years, a lot of stuff, maybe even most of it, far more so than we can even imagine now, is going to be online, which includes mating and dating. And we all know what happens when things go online. The supremacy of looks, which are important to begin with, becomes even more important. And so mating and dating becomes even more superficial than it already is. It's already bad and it's going to get worse over time, there's no question. But finally we come to the phenomenon of the American woman. And the question is the American woman distinct from other women? Well, not in terms of the universals, obviously. But there is a number of distinctions that exist, and they persist, in part because for better or worse, mostly for worse, the United States is sort of the epicenter of global culture, and in part because of the peculiarities and the particularities of the United States as a culture with its history. So I'd like to start with the oddest of these phenomena, which is politics. Now, politics as a phenomenon exists in every country, but in the United States, politics isn't just politics. It consumes and subsumes everything. You need to be good looking, you need to have a good job, blah, blah, blah. Sure, that's all true, but once you pass the rudimentary stuff, the basic stuff, you're going to run into some new problems, especially when it comes to dating American women. And I've observed this from afar quite a lot. I've talked to a lot of men about this too, and invariably, probably after looks and money and status, which is pretty much the same thing as money, politics seems to be increasingly important to women, especially younger women. And so again, if you're a Zoomer or even younger, you have to deal with some pretty nutty stuff. Now, obviously, in the United States, politics is typically divided along the lines of left and right, extremely so, and most women overwhelmingly tend towards left-leaning beliefs. And so gone are the days where politics and religion were not polite topics for the dinner table, let alone dating. And it seems to be the case, both anecdotally and things you can look at, that a lot of American women place a premium on your political views and how much your political views sync with her political views. And this isn't just a superficial laundry list. They really firmly, truly believe that if you have certain political views, let's say you're a Trump supporter, or even a little bit right of center, that it's impossible to have a relationship with you or maintain any kind of relations with you. And so this is one of the big challenges, because women, on average, tend to be herd creatures. They tend to be more politically animated than men are, on average, as well. And for them, it's a bit like status signaling, in a way. And if you don't agree with them, or God forbid you say, oh, you're kind of apolitical, you're not really into politics very much, then they're going to be suspicious of you. Now, I'm not making this up. I've talked to a lot of men who've confirmed this. In fact, a lot of my information on this comes from having spoken to men who've dated a lot of American women, attempted to, generally between the ages of 20 and 40. And it seems these days that politics, for probably obvious reasons you can intuit, is a very important factor in dating. So once you get past all the basic stuff like looks, money, and status, you have a new hurdle to get beyond. And even if she were to accept your political beliefs, different as they might be, unless you align one-to-one, there's probably going to be a lot of tension going forward if you decide to date somebody or end up in a relationship with the individual. And this is a very, very American phenomenon. To have politics up there as an important criterion for a relationship, a marriage, dating, whatever. And on top of that, given the political divide that exists between young men and women these days, with young men being tendency-wise much more right-leaning, and women overwhelmingly, not just tendency-wise, being left-leaning, it's a recipe for disaster. Now, here's another one that is not specific to the United States, but I would say the United States was sort of the founder of this effect, if you will. And we all know that boinking rates have been going down a fair bit in recent years. And online, there's a lot of discourse on looks maxing and what have you. Well, where does this come from? The most salient factor in looks, beyond obvious structural things that you can do nothing about, save for surgery, is being overweight, being fat, or being obese. And there are a lot more obese people now than there were 30 years ago. And there are vastly more overweight people, which is to say people who are not obese, but people who are above what their weight's supposed to be. And this has a huge effect on things in your attractiveness, your facial features, as well as your body. Now, here men and women are basically at parity, depending on the study or the stats you look at. But basically men and women are equally fat in the United States. The difference here, in contrast to a lot of cultures, is that in the United States, in many circles, it's not only encouraged, but it's seen as acceptable. Whereas in other cultures and countries, where you have ascendant rates of obesity and being overweight, it's still frowned upon, it's still seen as a negative, and you would still be encouraged to lose weight. In the United States, it's kind of a push and pull, where a lot of people will still encourage you to lose weight, but there is a huge movement, if you wish to call it, a huge trend for accepting people the way they are. And despite the relative parity of being overweight or obese between men and women, it's invariably the women who tell you that they need to be accepted on their own terms, even if they're fat or overweight, or God forbid, obese, all the while maintaining normal standards that you as a man need to stay fit, not be overweight, not be obese. So there's that double standard, which I think is uniquely American. I'm allowed to be fat as a woman, but you're not allowed to be fat as a man. Is this universal? No, but it's very, very common. I think the political thing is much more universal these days. And finally, there's this notion of dating culture. Dating culture, as it manifests itself in the United States, is kind of odd. It's like the market-driven forces of the United States made manifest in the dating market. There's very little spontaneity to it. It's basically just going shopping for a partner. And you can sift through a whole bunch of them over the course of a few weeks, especially if you're a woman and you have a lot of options, which again reinforces the paradox of choice stress, where people simply can't decide because they're overwhelmed by the choices available to them, and it's just too much. Not uniquely American, although predominantly American as a phenomenon. And as the world becomes more and more globalized and the internet becomes more and more ascendant, we are seeing more of this, and we will see more of this. But these are the factors I've observed, having talked to a lot of American men and having observed things both online and read things that seem to be typically American, that define a lot of American women and make it especially difficult and even painful dating American women, because these factors are anything but conventional. They are quirks and oddities of American culture. Anyway, as always, thank you for tuning in. Many special thanks to my patrons on Patreon. You guys are the best. You keep the channel alive. Without you, all would be dust and ash. And many special thanks to my donors on PayPal as well. If you can leave a like, comment, share, and subscribe, it'd be much appreciated. Until the next time, if I'm still alive, may the gods watch over you. Take care for now. If you liked this video, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you enjoy my content, please consider making a donation or becoming a patron. Thanks for watching.